All right, before we get on to the next video I was going to do about the building your own gaming rig, I wanted to kind of sidestep and go over a couple of news articles I'm seeing that were out a little more recently here. Because tech news is kind of all over the place, and same with kind of like gaming reviews. I don't know who's writing these articles, but something is definitely off. So this is going to be a little bit different of a video from what I usually do because this is more of the commentary side of things. I usually do videos like these on TikTok, which is much shorter format, and I try to cap it at 5 minutes per topic there. But I feel with YouTube, you get a little more freedom in that. So, but I picked out 4 articles here that I've seen recently while just kind of scrolling around, the internet, and I'm just not liking the state of certain things. One of these will be kind of a benign, just like hey, a change is taking place, and didn't see too big of a problem with it. But the topics we're going to cover is Windows update changes that are happening, Nvidia DLSS, and how it's saving Nvidia from a problem they're having, which is terrible. The first article is legit, not too bad, but the rest of these are kind of horrible. An article about soldered RAM and why a author of the article thinks it's just the next best thing. Soldered RAM on motherboards is where it's going, which is, I doubt that, and sounds awful. We'll get into that. And then a Steam machine competitor, possibly somebody has built a machine that can compete with the Steam machine. Steam machine's not out yet. And in that article, I'll talk about some of the glaring issues with the writing on that. Well, you'll see what that's about, but that's kind of what we got. And then from there, I'll give commentary on each of those. I am going to try something a little bit different where I'm going to throw some images in the corner. So let me know in the comments if you like this format or not, or anything in here, and just let me know what you're thinking, as I'm trying to avoid as much post-processing as possible, because it's just me. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so the first article I want to talk about here was Neowin reported that Microsoft is finally fixing what makes everyone hate Windows Update, as you can see there. And the short of this is they're going to make it so you can postpone Windows updates indefinitely. Now, I covered this on TikTok, but as I'm trying to centralize my social media presence per topic, I felt this should go on this channel. And for those that don't know, I have a tech background. I've worked in IT as a service provider, as a managed service provider, technician. I've worked in telecom all over the place and have had to do user support a lot. And letting users choose not to update their machines indefinitely, to postpone those updates, is a really bad idea. I don't think a lot of people remember what the days of like Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7 were like without aggressive patching schedules. And, the problem is that people get into this rhythm of not updating, and then there are attack vectors that are present where they look for machines that are not updated and they exploit those machines, and we're going to see problems because of that. A lot of people are going to keep putting updates off because they just don't want to, and for other reasons, and I'll get into those, but and they're going to do that, and it's going to cause problems. And globally, it's going to create an issue with security for personal machines, not so much business machines, though I do see an avenue where, having worked for a managed service provider, you're going to see businesses request that, hey, could you just disable updating altogether? And it's like, patches are very necessary. I'm not sure, it doesn't really say whether this is going to affect how the antivirus updates within Windows, because generally your antivirus updates do not require a reboot. They just kind of run. It's more of the driver updates and the major system updates that you need a reboot for, which you should be restarting your machine every now and again. I did a video elsewhere, I forget if it was on here or someplace else, but it was like once a month, reboot your machine. It's good for your machine and it keeps things running smoothly. And it really is ridiculous. People get upset about it. I've heard every excuse for why people don't want to do that. Further on, it says here, in an effort to fix Windows 11 and address complaints from frustrated customers, Microsoft announced major changes to Windows Update soon. Windows 11 will let you pause updates indefinitely, or as Windows boss Pawan Tvari, I got his name wrong, I'm sorry, says, for as long as you want. In the current form, Windows 11 lets you pause its update mechanisms for up to 30 days, after which it downloads available updates, whether you like it or not. And, again, that's the problem, is that people are going to put these off. They're going to have technical issues, and either they're going to have to pay a ton of money to get virus issues or driver issues fixed. It's going to create more of a headache for the end users. And I don't know if Microsoft's just thinking, like, we'll just show them, we'll let them see what it's like. But I remember the hellscape that Windows 7 and older was before aggressive patch scheduling. I love where the patch scheduling has gone. Sure, it can be annoying from time to time, but you can plan around that. And there's enough built into Windows to let you do that. Horror stories about Windows restarting and applying updates automatically surface online every now and then. And Microsoft wants to make sure that that never happens by limiting the number of mandatory resets to just one per month. So it looks like we're still getting one reboot per month. But again, updates are normal. And if you just set time to say, I think I said this in the TikTok video I did. If you just set time to say, hey, it's the third Saturday of the month, it's time for me to run my updates and reboot. I better save all my documents and close. Because that issue there, the applying updates automatically and then it just interrupts what you're doing, that's a user issue. And unfortunately, just because the user has decided not to keep track of their work and do that, as bad as this sounds, from a technical standpoint, that is not a good enough excuse to say, let's go ahead and sacrifice security for user convenience. And unfortunately, we've seen what it's like to sacrifice security for user convenience over multiple operating systems, and the problems that's caused. And specifically with Windows, that's one of the bigger issues with Windows. It's the end users. It's not so much the operating system. Yes, there are issues with Windows, but a lot of times it's the end users not knowing what they're doing, not understanding how they're using the software or the operating system and having issues. And this comes from years working in IT. Anybody that's worked in IT at tier 1, tier 2 level will know this. They will absolutely know the pain that it is of users not doing things properly and then coming and crying like, oh my God, this isn't working and I just don't understand. And it's really inconvenient. I don't like updates, and I've heard every excuse. Moving on, it says the news about Microsoft. Oh yeah, this bit, sorry, I forgot about this section. This is where I question some of these tech articles. I made a mistake when I said this one wasn't as bad. I don't know why this paragraph is in here at the end of this article from Neo1, but it says the news about Microsoft improving Windows 11 came in interesting times. Apple recently introduced the MacBook Neo. Okay, I don't know why they decided to plug a MacBook laptop at the end there. This looks like advertising bed in the article. Windows did not change their updating schedule because a new MacBook is coming out. The fact that that's implied in the same article is ridiculous. And I'll have links to all the articles I'm talking about in the description of this video, but this is ridiculous. This paragraph has nothing to do with the Windows side. They try to make it that way, though, saying it's a wake-up call for Microsoft to get it together and get things working, but that is complete just hooey on that. I mean, come on. There was no need to plug a Mac product in this article that had nothing to do with Apple, except for the fact that it was like, well, let's dunk on Windows, make it sound like it's getting better. And then, oh yeah, let's plug this MacBook, and it's got a link so you can go buy it for $600. And it's like, oh God. So anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what the thinking was there or why they decided that was something to throw in. They must have been paid for that link, but I don't know. So that's speculative at this point. So anyway, yeah, that's all I've got on the NeoWin Windows update stuff. All right, so next up, we have this article from XDA. This is an outlet I'm not a huge fan of. Their stuff just comes up all the time in my automatic Google feed or in other places where I'm looking for tech news. They're just there. And this is one of the more terrible ones out there because the articles, if they're not being AI written, it is some of the sloppiest writing I've seen. And it kind of just attacks itself to a point, and I'll get to what I mean. But the summary of this article is essentially that DLSS is like it says, quietly saving Nvidia from a problem no GPU manufacturer can brute force anymore. Basically, this article is talking about how newer DLSS is able to make 4K happen, and it's the saving grace of Nvidia because of that. And there's a couple of problems with this article, and I'll point those out, but I'm going to use this article as an opportunity to harp on the issue again about 4K gaming, which, if you're watching my other series that I'm doing about building a gaming PC, you'll know that I'm talking about just going to 1080p, why that's sufficient with the option to go to 1440, and I'll get into that, but let's get to the meat of some of the points of this article, because it really is interesting, how they're talking about how this is solving a problem, and then you'll see that it doesn't. So going to the next section here, technically, it says there at the top, technically speaking, we've reached a tipping point where the neural rendering, which is DLSS, is doing more work than traditional rasterization. More recently, if you're playing games in 4K, the 4K frame itself is often internally rendered at just 1080p or sometimes even lower, and then reconstructed by 4K AI. If the game was designed to run at 1080, why am I running it at 4K? And I've long said that I think the problem is a lot of people were sold on the fact they needed 4K because the 1080 market was saturated. You couldn't make any more money there. Manufacturers couldn't make any more money there, and they wanted to make more money, so they started telling people, if you're not playing in 4K, you're not playing the game right. And we'll go over the 4K portion a little bit, but I looked up a bunch of games. One of those was Fortnite. I play Fortnite regularly. 1080 is its regular native resolution, as with a lot of competitive live service games. And as I've mentioned in other places on the internet, when people are actually being competitive, the pros that do esports, they're not playing in 4K. They're playing at 1080, and they're usually around 144 FPS on the refresh. That's average, though. You can look those up. So they're not doing these monster builds. Also, those things cost a lot of money. Trying to get your machine to do 4K immediately adds more overhead to your budget you're going to have for building a PC. So it's ridiculous to have that. And so, you know, it really is ridiculous that they're still trying to push this 4K thing. And you know, I think that it's a neat idea to a degree, but it's just not needed for the average person. It really isn't. If we go under the found in this portion, this is something I found very funny. Nvidia reports themselves that over 80% of GeForce RTX players are using DLSS. Now, going back to the Fortnite thing I talked about, I run that in 1080, but I had performance issues with that. It was running native in 1080, but I was getting really severe frame drops and had issues. What I found out was scaling was still on. Now, I'm running a different card. I'm not running Nvidia. I'm running an AMD card. But with that, it was still putting the basically frame gen, and it was putting upscaling on. I didn't need those. As soon as I lopped those off and told it not to do that, it wasn't re-rendering 1080 frames into 1080. For whatever reason, I thought it was needing to do that. And then I was getting solid performance. So now I play at 1080, 144, no problem. And I think that the problem with this reporting is it doesn't look at, do the 80% of RTX players know that it's on if they're only intending to play in 1080? Are they having performance issues because it's trying to upscale a frame that's already at the native resolution needed? Basically, is it sampling that frame and then rerunning it back and going, here's your frame again, and causing more work on the GPU than needed, and the processor for that matter? I think it's something that needs to be looked at. I also had this problem with Oblivion Remastered. I was, you know, I have a pretty decent card, and it was having issues. That game was just eating every system resource, and then I found it was doing the same thing. It was trying to take the base resolution upscale. I don't know what Oblivion's is. I am having a hard time finding that. I can't imagine that it's anything better than 1080 on the base resolution. Part of me wants to say it's 720. And that may be why there's still some work in there if it's having to upscale 720 to 1080, which reminds me I probably need to test Oblivion Remastered at 720 and see what that looks like. But there's definitely something off someplace, and I think it's a combination of the base resolution and what the hardware is being forced to do. Because now in there to get consistent, which I only run that one at 60 FPS because it's a cinematic game. I don't need it at higher than that. I have the equivalent of frame gen off. I have a lot of that upscaling just off. It's just running native 1-for-1, and that seems to be working a lot better. So it also makes me wonder why, if I'm seeing a lot of videos where people are talking about, you know, why it's so hard to 4K game, if it's the fact that you just can't because the settings are only doing so much, and it's, you know, it's a lot. And this touches on that. So, you know, it talks at the bottom there too, where people are having a problem sustaining over 140 frames per second in 4K, and they're only getting 30 FPS, which I think it's because they set people up for an unrealistic expectation, which is 4K gaming at the same frame rates you'd see at 1080. And they were like, we're going to do it with this algorithm, with this AI, the software, and it's going to be great. And now Nvidia's like, it's saving us, we're doing it. And it's like, but you're not. And there's multiple tech channels that have shown a lot of the artifacting that is present there, and it really is ridiculous. And you know, it's terrible that it's got to be this way, but they want to make that money, and they're only going to make it by doing more and more. So moving on to the other section here, this article did get criticism in its own comments, and they're talking about how in order for the GPU to work, you know, as intended, to brute force 4K, to like use the hardware to render the 4K, it would use over 1,000 watts of power, and most homes can't handle that. And the comments are like, that's 1,000 watts. One of the comments was like, I've got a 1,200 watt microwave. I guess I better unplug that since I can't run it on my circuit in my house. It could cause issues if you have, you know, your rig plugged into a circuit where you've got maybe a microwave. It could be an issue if they're both running at the same time. But this here is where it makes me wonder, are these articles being written by AI? Are they not fact checking anything? What is the deal here to making a claim like this? And then they go on to contradict what they said before about the fact of how, you know, it's, you know, it would take so much power to do, and it's so bad and everything. And then it says it's even possible now to power limit your RTX 50 series because the DLSS provides enough performance to make the extra power unnecessary. Power limiting RTX 5090 to about 70, which is approximately 400 watts, will allow it to surpass your monitor and every capable showing with DLSS, making the 200 watt of brute force completely unnecessary and loud, which doesn't make any sense to me. If you're saying that 4K is not achievable because of the power consumption, but then the AI is able to do it, but then people are having a hard time keeping frame rates, that seems fairly confusing here. This seems all over the place. So you're going to either get AI slop generated frames, which has already been explored on multiple other channels about how bad that looks, or you're going to end up with some kind of, Frankenstein version of your game that may or may not run well, because let's keep in mind the AI may have issues and cause game performance issues. So I wanted to move on to another section here, which was about view distances and monitors. I got to pull an engine up on my side, which I failed to do to prep for this, but and so what I want to show you is this chart here. Like I said, I'll have links to everything in the description, but this chart talks about 4K view sizes. And essentially it's going to say the TV size, we can supplant monitor size for that, the distance you need to be away from it, and then the max distance from that. So if you have a 43-inch 4K television, you need to be about 3 feet away from it in order to the minimum distance to enjoy that resolution. I don't know about you, but having a 43-inch monitor, 3 feet in front of my face does not seem desirable. Now, that being said, if you're going to be 6 feet away, which is across a room, that'll probably be something you can enjoy. And I'll show you why that really doesn't matter in a minute, because it's just cost. It's more for the TV in some cases, and it's more expense on the hardware for your machine. If we go up to 65-inch, which I think that's the dream for a lot of people, I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments what your ideal monitor sizes or display sizes, TV sizes. But a 65-inch monitor, you need to be at like 4 feet. That's going to be pretty close. You're going to be having problems keeping track of that. And then the max distance, which makes it a little better, is about 9 feet. And again, I've made this claim before, is if you're going to have a big TV like that, you're going to need to be fairly far away from it. Now, do these have use cases? Absolutely. If you're trying to do 4K gaming in an event and you want to display that out, and you're going to have multiple people watching, that may be worth it. But again, there's better solutions, in my opinion, that I just don't think that the 4K gaming portion really addresses that well. And, I think 4K is a waste of money. I think it's useless. And I think too many people are obsessed with doing 4K gaming when really all they need is 1080. So these come from I didn't mention, I'm sorry, these come from Sony's website on their own displays. And I use them because they're a pretty good measure of stuff there. But we're going to look at, this is just HD, which is 1080. This is 1080 viewing distances. And so my setup, I'm running 1080. I have the option to go to 1440, not on this monitor, but my hardware will definitely do that. I could technically do 4K at 30 FPS with what I've got set up, but I don't care to do that. But we're looking at 1080 as the resolution. And keep in mind on these, you'd be able to hit resolutions, no problem, of 144 and up on your FPS without a problem because you're only doing 1080. And I have a 27-inch monitor on my desk. I don't foresee too many people doing a 22-inch monitor at 2.62 feet, but I guess if you're trying to save some money, maybe that might work. But generally, and I measured, I'm about 3 feet away from my monitor when I'm playing games. So that definitely fits well for the 26-inch or 27-inch. And then technically, you go to a 32-inch and be about 4 feet away. That's going to let you not have to huddle over. You see a lot of streamers and they do that. They huddle over because their monitor's the wrong size for what they're doing. And then you can go, there is a cutoff. You can go all the way up to about 60 inches and be 8 feet away to see that. They don't really have minimums because you can be so close, but I've heard people complain about, you can see the pixels. You can see, there's pixelization on the screen. Yes, if you're sitting closer than the 2.62 feet, you're going to start seeing those artifacts. If you're sitting that close, I have to wonder if you're not a child that's trying to lick the screen. But for me, I find that 1080 on a 27-inch screen is very well. I didn't bother pulling the numbers for 1440. They're kind of an in-between though, between 1080 and 4K. You get a little more leeway with your distance in there. So I'll end up covering these numbers again in the video I do over monitors on on my video series for building a PC, as I slipped there. Sorry, guys. So, but yeah, just to kind of go over that, I think it's really ridiculous that we're still pushing this 4K narrative. For a lot of people, you've been duped by marketing. You don't need 4K unless you have some specific use case, like you want your gaming rig to be next to or hooked up to a giant monitor, you're going to entertain people, then that would maybe, in my opinion, justify being further away from that and having that much room. But for most people, the average user that's doing gaming, you're sitting at a desk with a controller, looking at a screen. You're doing what competitive gamers are doing, or you're doing what casual gaming is doing. And for casual gaming, it really does not suit the need to get a 4K monitor. You'll save some money. The monitor I got is an Acer, and I got that one for about $100 on a sale because it was 1080 only. And for me, when I was trying to spec a build out, having a 1080 monitor with, you know, all the features that are going to take advantage of all the great color options and stuff in modern games was more important than trying to get a 4K monitor that was super expensive. And I plan on buying more 1080 monitors. I will probably end up retiring this monitor as a secondary and then getting one that can do up to 1440, but I don't plan on doing more than that. And as far as frame rates go, I'm fine with 144. A lot of people talk about whether or not there's performance increase in how you play games. For me, there was. I'm not a very competitive person. I enjoy playing Fortnite. I'm not that great at it. But in Fortnite, for example, I was crap. I'm an old man. I was getting 5 kills per match. I average about 10 per match now just because of the updated FPS. I can see more. Plus, having higher end graphics card, my view distance is further. There's a number of settings that let me take advantage of the game a lot more than I could prior. So anyway, that's all I've got for that on the 4K portion of DLSS. I think it's a waste of time to be getting people to spend X amount of dollars more on cards where you're basically just getting AI in there that is upscaling stuff that you don't need. Save your money, get 1080 cards. And to that point, a lot of older cards that are capable of doing 1080 are doing just fine with a lot of modern games. You know, as I talked about in my video series, my old computer was 12 years old and I was still playing modern games like Helldivers. Did I have all the bells and whistles? No, but I could still play with friends. And that's saying a lot considering that was a 12-year-old machine. You know, I did a couple of graphics card updates. If you want, check my channel. There's a video on there called My Old Potato, I think is what it is. And that talks about the specs of that machine. You'll get an idea what I was running, but it was fully capable of doing a lot for as old as it was. And it was a Dell. So anyway, yeah. So when it comes to outlets that are doing tech reporting, I think How to Geek was actually pretty good, but some of the stuff I'm seeing from them is making me seriously doubt their journalistic integrity. And I bring you this hot flaming garbage that is Soldered RAM is the future of desktops, and I finally understand why. This has to be AI written, or this has to be someone that's never been in IT or has never really touched technology aside from just reading a few liner notes and then deciding this is the way. So let's dig into this one here. The author talks about how the RAM is faster, cheaper, and consumes less power when it's soldered to the board. Now, Mac has been doing this for a while, and while those may be some pluses, I don't know Macs as being cost-effective machines. It's a status symbol is what you're buying. Let's look at a couple of glaring issues here. Nowhere in the article does he list how much cheaper, does he list the cost reduction, you know, at all, the power consumption savings, nor does he list the improvements in speed. This article simply just takes an opinion of soldered RAM is future of desktops, and that's it. There's nothing substantial to it. The article is fairly short. There is nothing substantial that tells you why they'd be so much better. What I will tell you from a tech background is that while the claim itself is true, yes, absolutely, you will get better performance, it uses less power, and it can be cheaper, can be. I'll say can be because that's not always the case. The issue with all that is the average user is not going to touch any of that performance uplift. They're not. The average user that is browsing the web, maybe running like a photo editing program, watching videos, they are not going to notice the uplift in performance because it's soldered to the board. They're just not. It's not going to be there. It's the same as telling someone they need, you know, certain RAM speeds when, you know, in particular, you know, 6400 is probably absolutely fine for the average person even gaming. No issue there whatsoever. You know, the problem with soldering on components is that And the whole problem with this article is promoting e-waste. It's promoting, getting rid of your right to repair. We've seen devices where everything's soldered on board, and then we've also seen where you can't upgrade anything. Phones are a good example of that. You could probably get a lot more out of your phones if you could replace the processor, the memory, and the storage. But since you can't do that, you're looking at having to replace your phones every 5 to 6 years because that's the life cycle. That's the intended life cycle of it. Whereas if you could upgrade, you wouldn't need to, and there'd be no money to make off of hardware. And I do not want to see PCs go to that. If you're going to have a PC ecosystem where you can't upgrade the RAM, where it's, and I've seen people do the pack way back when people were getting MacBooks. They were like, I only have a 128, gigs of RAM. I need an upgrade, so I'm just going to get another MacBook. That is what they would like. That is the setup a lot of companies would like, is for you to just buy a whole new machine, and then the old one gets landfilled because it's used. Nobody wants that. And they don't want you to replace the parts on it, which is ridiculous. The whole point of owning a desktop computer is so that you can replace the RAM, so you can upgrade the processor, the GPU, all those components. If we just solder it on wholesale, it's going to be cheaper for the manufacturer. It is not going to be cheaper for the end user. It's just not. There's that. And so the other fun thing about this whole e-waste glazing piece, if you will, is how at the end of the article, I'm not even making this up, the end of the article, he has a disclaimer, if you will, 2 lines at the very bottom under a line, which makes it look separate for the article. And then, he says the biggest issue is the upgradability loss. My dude, the upgradability issue is not the biggest loss. It's the e-waste loss. These machines will end up in piles upon piles in either landfills or places where child labor is used to pull these machines apart to harvest the goods out of them. The loss in upgradability is not. And that is such a horrible take for someone to write an article like this and be like, well, you can't upgrade, but that's the worst there is. Like, my God, what is happening to tech journalism these days? What happened to good deep dives into it? These things seem to be AI written, and I haven't looked into whether these articles are using that, but it's hard to tell these days. It just seems like bad journalism. Do we just have non-tech people who look, shiny tech, and I'm going to write an article on it, and this seems like a great idea. We've never done this before. Either he likes Apple products and thinks that's the future, or he's never seen that and has no clue. I don't know which one it is, but that's where it's at. And either way, it's ridiculous, and this is a trend that's got to stop. All right, last one up is this other article from XDA. Man, they just keep delivering on crummy articles. This one says, someone has already created a steam machine competitor, and it costs a pretty penny. The headline itself is bad, but let's look at the third option down here. We're going to ignore the other two. The third option down, price $1,139. Now, looking at their site, they have options from that up, to be fair, but steep versus expected sub $1,000 steam machine, but sales are reportedly strong. All right, so this has to be AI written because we don't have an actual price for the steam machine yet. And I know they say expected, so forgive me for being a little blown out of proportion there. But the problem I have is that they don't really give a lot of details in, and then again, they jump to a lot of conclusions and then contradict themselves. So, I did a video talking about the steam machine. I do not see that being an $800 box. Or $650. I've seen $650 floated. I just don't see it being $650 at all. I don't see it being $650 anywhere. I don't. I think maybe $800 at the cheapest if they have 2 different models. But I agree with a lot of people. It's going to be $1,000 or $1,200. That's going to be it. With the memory problems we're having, the delays they've done, I think that it's still going to be up there. And I don't think it's worth it in comparison. And this article's steep, 1139, $1,139. Okay, $139 is not that much more than $1,000. So even if the steam machine was $1,000, calling $139 up steep is really a stretch, And you're getting a lot more out of. There's a picture there of the machine. You're getting a lot more out of that than you're going to be getting out of the Steam machine, because this one will let you upgrade everything to it. As far as I could tell, the only thing I wasn't shown was the GPU. They're saying you can, so I'm not sure exactly what it's using. I'm assuming it slides in kind of sideways somewhere in there. I couldn't find good teardowns for it, but if you're paying $1,139 or $1,700, I think $1,700 might be a little steep depending on what you're getting. Again, depending on what you're getting. But if you're spending $1,200 and you're getting a machine where you can upgrade the CPU, the GPU, the RAM, and your storage, that's a pretty good deal. And also keep in mind that part of the price tag on this machine is going to be the manufacturer cost and the want for profit from the company that's doing it. And that company is, I forgot the name. I am so sorry, guys, was Planix. You know, you could build a micro ATX cube. I've just touched on the possibility of that and about how that could work as an option for somebody in the last video I did on build your own gaming rig. But you could build your own micro ATX form factor, small form factor machine and spend about the same amount of money, have the same good upgradability path. Or even better, if you want something that looks like this, if you know someone with a 3D printer or you have a 3D printer, you can just build your own 3D printed cases. I've seen people do this on YouTube and they look amazing. I've seen them do console knockoffs with PC components. If machines like this are viable and they take off, they'll be a great deal. They've stated you can put Windows on it, you can put Linux on it, whatever you want to do. But here's the thing, why, as I talked about with the Steam machine before, why would I want a Linux box where I can't play competitive games because anti-cheat doesn't work with SteamOS or on Linux for that matter, when I can just have a Windows machine where I can play all those games, enjoy all those games, they work natively with very few problems, and I get to have the full gaming experience and all that. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know, to buy a Steam machine at this point. The more that I see about the Steam machine, the less sense it makes to buy one. And as I stated in my Steam machine video that I did a while back, you know, I think that the market for the Steam machine is going to be people that are afraid to get into PC gaming, want a beefier rig and don't have the $2,000 to put out. Because I at this point, I say $2,000 is about what it costs to get a good desktop to run at 1080 and play games, which you do absolutely fine with. But for people that are afraid to do that, don't want to do that, can't get pre-builds, the Steam machine is going to be there to get. But again, there's kind of an uphill battle of getting people who have never played on Steam to buy this as well, because that is going to be a target audience, right? They want to get people into PC gaming, and to do that, they've got to get people in the Steam ecosystem, which means having a Steam game library. For me, I already have one. It's a no-brainer just to stick on PC and build gaming rigs, because I'll get a lot of time out of my gaming rigs. I already have my library. I can take it with me. If you are wanting to know more about Steam machine stuff, the video I did there, I'll link that in the description as well, so it'll be there. But yeah, the problem here is that the more I see the Steam machine, the less of a deal it seems like. And if it can't stay at the $800 price point, I don't think it's going to be able to get very many people. And I think there's going to be some people that will adopt it, but I see this being a problem. And then other concerns I had was just how long is it going to last? I think that the Steam machine is a great idea in practice, but I just don't see it working practically for a lot of people. So, but again, pointing out this article, I think this article is really ridiculous for how it's written, because it just, you know, the steep portion really got me. So steep. Real quick, if you guys wanted to see the specs on this, there you go. There are the specs for that. I'll also put a link to the website where this is from in the description as well. It's gonna be a lot of links in the description, but that'll give you an idea of what that machine does, the cost, all of that. I don't think the specs are too bad for that on the price. I can definitely see how they're making it cheaper. And again, you know, you can build a baseline PC micro ATX form factor on these types of specs, and then upgrade over time and it'll be doing absolutely fine. A number of games will run fine, even with Windows as your operating system with these settings. But if you want to continue to get more performance, you want to push a little further, you will need to make some adjustments, but you can do those over time. If your concern is just to get into PC gaming, or you want to stay in PC gaming and you don't have a lot to spend, there are cheap alternative paths to do so that will get you there. So that's where that's at. And, you know, I hope we get more details on the Steam machine soon, because I've really been waiting to dig into that and start going into what's there. So that's it for the news articles for now. All right, so that wraps up the few articles that I found. Obviously, I come across a lot of these. I'll probably end up making a few more videos like these, depending. Sometimes shorter. Maybe I'll do, shorter clips. Let me know what you would prefer. Would you prefer to see a separate video on each article as I come across those? Do you like the combined format here? Did you like the format of how it's laid out? Really just looking for feedback in here as well. And then, of course, feel free to comment on any of the articles that I talked about. Let me know what you see, what you feel, those kind of things. We will be moving on soon here to other videos about more of the hardware on the Build Your Own Gaming Rig series, which I keep renaming every time I do a video. But there is a playlist, so you can see that. And yeah, I'll get links for everything we talked about in the description of this video. And yeah, any feedback is welcome, guys. Let me know what you think, what could be improved, if you like the format or not. And yeah, till next time, I think that'll do it. So this video will come out on Friday, and there will not be a video over hardware and gaming rig that on this upcoming Friday. So just to let you know, that's what's going on. So anyways, guys, till next time, thanks for hanging out, and I appreciate you listening to me gab on and on about terrible IT and tech news and whatnot. So till next time, guys, bye.